Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion on water health with water quality specialist Taylor Register. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us about yourself, Taylor.
So I am a lifelong native of North Carolina. I grew up in a very small and rural part of eastern NC, so I spent the majority of my childhood out and about on the Neuse River, so it holds a special place in my heart. So before coming to Sound Rivers, I actually went to NC State where I majored in zoology, but a lot of my classes really focused on aquatic ecology, marine biology, fish science, all those things that are tied really closely to water quality and its importance. So before I came to Sound Rivers and I found this opportunity, I knew that I wanted to be involved in the environmental field in some aspect. So when I found this position that was based in my hometown and also was a place for me to kind of combine my passion for science and water quality while serving my home community, I immediately jumped on it and knew that this was kind of what I'd been working towards. And I absolutely love it. It is a dream job for me.
Well, you're a water quality specialist.
Yes.
What do you do?
So it's definitely a very unique role. Every single day looks different for me on the job, which I absolutely love. So I get a pretty even split between being out in the field and back in the lab. So some days I get to be out on the water in a boat or a kayak collecting water samples, or I might be driving around more rural parts of our watershed, investigating pollution issues as they arise. And then on other days, I'm back in the lab. I'm processing those water samples from our field days. I spend a lot of time analyzing and interpreting data and seeing what those water quality issues mean for our area and how we should address them. So it's a pretty science-based and hands-on position, and it's mainly just involved in monitoring our waterways and issues as they come up.
Well, it's always cool when you can do what you absolutely love.
Yes, it is.
I can see the smile throughout the interview. I can tell you really love it. When you're doing the water quality and the sampling, what are you looking for something specific, or are you just going out and taking water and searching for something?
So a little bit of both, actually. So we do a lot of general monitoring. So we go out and collect surface water samples looking for E. coli and seeing if those E. coli levels are either above or below the threshold the EPA is set for E. coli in recreational waters. We also take some of our lab equipment out in the field and we monitor for things that we can't see. So things like pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, all those things that are kind of going on in the water that we can't visually see but are really important indicators for water health. But at the same time, we get issues that come up and we know that there are certain pollution issues going on. So maybe a sewage spill and stuff like that, and we'll go out and pretty specifically kind of investigate for E. coli. Sometimes we will take DNA samples and try to figure out what exactly the source of pollution is, whether that be human or animal-based. And then sometimes for things like algal blooms, we'll go out and monitor specifically for pH and dissolved oxygen and take algal samples and submit those to the Department of Environmental Quality so we can see if those are harmful species of bacteria. So it definitely depends what we do kind of on the specific issue, but that's like the general gist of it.
Taylor, let us come inside the war room with you. You've gotten a hot tip. Now what do? You got to investigate it. How do you go about doing that?
So it usually starts with a lot of brainstorming on our part, trying to figure out where exactly this issue might be coming from. We utilize satellite imagery a lot, and at that point we'll kind of develop a sort of sampling plan to figure out exactly where the pollution is coming in at and what it's coming from. So that looks like several different sampling events over a long period of time. We usually go out either on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, collect these samples in both dry and wet conditions to see if rainfall might be influencing our results. And we also like to collect samples from a wide area so that we can kind of pinpoint where the issue might be most concentrated at and figure out where exactly it's coming from. So at that point, once we have got a pretty solid set of data, we're kind of able to look at those results and draw some pretty clear conclusions on where exactly this is coming from and what the source is. So with that information, we'll usually go to local cities or the Department of Environmental Quality just to share our findings and kind of collaborate with them at that point to get it resolved. And we'll usually keep up with our routine monitoring until we notice the issue is completely resolved to see if it's getting worse or any other things that we should share at that point as well. Definitely depends on the situation, but more often than not, that's the general gist of what we do, investigation mode.
Is there something that pops up on a regular basis for you in the water that we could get rid of, but somehow it's still there?
I would have to say the biggest thing that I deal with on a daily basis is E. coli and bacterial pollution. That's something that we kind of have natural populations of in our environment. We can't completely eradicate it, but that's why we have those kind of safe thresholds. But when we see levels extremely high, that's kind of indicative to us that there is an ongoing issue. And more often than not, it's sewage related. So some communities have sewer infrastructure issues. And with these issues come things like pipe failures and breaks and maybe failing septic systems. And those are things that we can kind of work with local cities to address and get those resolved. Because like I said, E. coli is always going to be there, but sometimes the levels that we see absolutely shouldn't be, and we can work closely with them and try to get that addressed.
Let me ask you, in working with the local communities and the cities, and that oftentimes requires working with politicians and all that, how does that work for you? Is that a challenge, or do you find most people cooperative?
Definitely both. Something that's really big for us is the importance of collaboration and maintaining positive relationships with city officials. So we like to go at it with the mindset of, hey, this is something that's going on. It's really detrimental to not only our waterways, but also the community that depends on it. How can we work together and get this addressed? So instead of kind of blaming these issues on city negligence, we really like to be cooperative and kind of build that environment of trust to where we can work together and get things done. And more often than not, that works out really well, and people are pretty cooperative with us. However, there is a good bit of work on our part as far as really staying on top of these officials and making sure they're doing their part of the process, while also encouraging full transparency with the community and making sure that they are updated on what's going on. So navigating these relationships is definitely a bit tricky at first. There can be some initial distrust with cities thinking we're just there to get them in trouble. But in reality, that's not the case. We want to serve as a resource and help out in any way that we can.
And do you find the local citizenry on board with you?
Yes, absolutely. People are really, really involved in what we're doing, and they want their things to be cleaned up, naturally so. So we get a lot of community support alongside us at different events and stuff like that, and people really trying to hold these city officials accountable to get this issue resolved.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't get up off the couch yet. No, we're coming right back. Stick around.